Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, what a hard act you all are to follow. As I listened to all of the presentations today, I mentally rewrote my presentation 20 times, but here we are at the very end of the day, and I appreciate that it's been an intellectually rich experience today. Before I begin, I just need to make a couple of quick framing comments. It's been a great afternoon. Thank you very much to the Organisation of World Heritage Cities. I don't think Jahan's here, even under the table or in his chair or wherever, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Actually, it's the first time I've attended one of the World Congress of this meeting, even though I've met OHWC colleagues in many places and, in fact, helped to draft an MOU between ICOMOS and the organisation when I was in the ICOMOS board. It's a wonderful season here in Korea. We really should not stay inside so much. It's a wonderful autumn time of year, very beautiful and worth visiting. As I said this morning, I'm at Deakin University in Melbourne. I didn't mention, but I should have perhaps, that I also work as an ICOMOS World Heritage Advisor. I've worked in the ICOMOS World Heritage Program at a very intensive level since 2006 and currently work on the evaluation of nominations. And I've worked in that capacity also on the rights-based approaches work, which was mentioned a lot today, but I'm not actually going to talk about that now, but I can later if need be. And I've also worked very passionately on breaking down the barriers between natural and cultural heritage. But in this case study, I worked as a research partner with an absolutely inspiring colleague, Susan Fayyad, who is a senior employee of the city of Ballarat. And actually, it would have been much better if she were here instead of me, or at least alongside, because she is a real inspiring advocate for the historic urban landscape, or HUL, or HUL, or HUL, whichever one you like. So this is really her story to tell rather than mine, but I'll do my best to bring her into the space. So I have to tell you that as a heritage practitioner, and as I said, I was on the ICOMOS International Board for 9 years, and was so at the time that the UNESCO recommendation on the HUL was adopted. I was not personally expecting the HUL to have a transformational effect at all, even though there were many global examples that stimulated the need for its development. UNESCO makes recommendations kind of a lot, and many of them are forgotten as soon as the ink is dry. So I wasn't sure how it would go, and I didn't find its language especially inspiring. So it's been quite a surprise, delightful surprise to me that it has had quite an impact around the world. And I here recognize the presence in the room of people who've worked very hard to make that a possibility, including, of course, Anna and Michael. So I'm a little humbled to present before them. So I also noted that the HUL is not in the list of international principles to be recognized in the OWHC draft that we've been talking about today, but I think it really should be. So on with the show. What do I do here? This device runs the slides. And where do I? Very good. I think before I go on, I'm giving a case study from Australia, my home country. The state of Victoria is right at the bottom of Australia, and Ballarat is located about 110 kilometres north and west of the state capital, Melbourne, which is Australia's second largest city. I should just tell you that maybe we have a few advantages in Australia because we don't have monuments in our legislation at all, and in fact prefer to discuss things under the very broad rubric of place. Ballarat, let me introduce you to Ballarat, bring Ballarat to you. It's in the traditional country of the Wadawurrung and Djadjawurrung peoples. in what is now known as the Central Goldfields region of our state. As I mentioned, it's a little more than 100 kilometres away from the capital city, Melbourne. It has a population now of about, just over 100,000 people, but it provides services to a larger catchment of more than 400,000. It is projected to grow very rapidly in the future. There is a growth of 60% projected by 2040, which is not that far away. Change is therefore a prominent theme for Ballarat's communities, presenting a range of challenges for the city's government and citizens. Now, the city is well known for its heritage character, established during the rapid development of the region during what is known as the Victorian Gold Rush, which started in the 1850s. The Victorian-era streetscapes of the historic centre are complemented by 19th, 20th and 21st century suburbs, each with its own character and communities. There are more than 10,000 individual properties already protected by heritage controls at local, state and national levels in Ballarat, and the city's landscape is of immense cultural significance for its ancient and continuing significance to the Aboriginal traditional owners. Ballarat's heritage is viewed by its communities and local government as a highly valued asset. This isn't a case like others we've heard today where local people are not engaged with heritage. It really is quite the opposite. But there have been tensions in Ballarat arising from rapid social and economic changes. I should quickly say that Ballarat is not a World Heritage City, although coincidentally, work has recently commenced to explore the possibilities for a future World Heritage nomination oriented at the international significance of the landscapes of the Victorian gold rushes, which may eventually result in some parts of Ballarat being included in the World Heritage List. But I think initially when we started the work on the historic urban landscape approach to Ballarat's future, they were proudly saying this isn't just for World Heritage cities. It's not even just for historic cities, so-called. It's for any and all cities and the problems they face. I hope that many of you are already familiar with the 2011 UNESCO recommendation, which is proposed as a means of understanding urban areas in terms of the historic layering of cultural and natural values and attributes, extending beyond the notion of historic centre or precinct to include the entirety of the broader urban context and its geographical setting. It includes social and cultural practices and values, economic processes, which we've talked about quite a lot today, and the intangible dimensions of heritage that are related to diversity and identity. The HUL, H-U-L, as it is called, has been applied in many different ways in cities throughout the world. It isn't a one-size-fits-all, but it can be best understood as a shift. The work done within the HUL pilot has identified 4 sets of tools, shown here on the slide: community engagement tools, knowledge and planning tools, regulatory systems, and financial tools. This has provided a means of structuring the implementation of the HUL to respond to different priorities and for experiences to be shared across the continents. In 2013, the City of Ballarat became, as Richard just said, the first local government in the world to join the international HUL pilot program and has been implementing this approach ever since. Applying a HUL approach has required challenging the status quo and gradually introducing new concepts across the city. The round figure and text that goes with it on the right-hand side visually represents Ballarat's approach, and I've included it in the paper that's in your booklet because I think it takes a little bit of looking at to appreciate. It is what Susan and her colleagues call a virtuous cycle, where the things that make the city distinctive and valued are used to inspire change that in turn becomes an important part of the place. so it does incorporate the heritage of today. Essential requirements of this approach are citizen and stakeholder participation, comprehensive and grounded knowledge about Ballarat, and multiple forms of collaboration. The whole recommendation provided a 6-point plan of action that has been useful in structuring the implementation of Ballarat and tracking the achievements. The first one of those has involved mapping Ballarat's historic urban landscape, establishing a new world of knowledge, and picks up on a number of the things that others have mentioned today. Information is critical to the implementation of the whole, and some baseline work was done to pull together the wealth of previously fragmented data and reports that were in the form of grey literature about Ballarat's heritage, history, and cultural values. These initial studies allowed the information to be presented spatially. 2 online tools, one of which is a much simpler version of the one that we've just seen from Johannes, were developed to provide collaborative platforms to contribute to the question of what makes Ballarat Ballarat. These are called Hull Ballarat, which I'll show you at the end, and Visualising Ballarat. The URLs for these are given in the printed paper as well. The second is participatory planning and community engagement, building consensus about the city's values. One example of many that have been undertaken is the process of producing a local area plan for a part of the city called Ballarat East. This involved widespread community processes to create a community map based on the format of large-scale community conversation called Ballarat Imagine, a values-based methodology that was inspired by the Hull. Set in the context of future change, it invited responses to 3 emotive questions. What do you love, imagine, and want to retain in Ballarat? Understanding the values and character of Ballarat East has involved a wide range of community engagement models. The formal planning mechanisms based on these will guide future changes. So it's very important for me to point out that this isn't just a feel-good community exercise. It has a linkage with some very hard-edged planning mechanisms that are set by state legislation. This has been a very interesting exercise in many ways, in part because the historical and visual character of Ballarat East is very different than the better-known Victorian-era streetscapes of the city centre. Understanding these subtle characteristics and values has allowed the City Council to develop localised planning controls. Ron Van Oors suggested that the whole journey is about making the planning framework a true instrument of 21st century, forward-looking, proactive, inclusive and participative decision-making. This has been the experience of the Ballarat Hull program, which has stimulated a fresh dialogue about urban conservation and contemporary meanings, including the challenge of creating new residential and commercial spaces and welcoming large numbers of new citizens to the city and leaving space for their place associations, which have yet to happen. The experience of using the Hull in the context of rapid change has been transformational for the city of Ballarat and has allowed heritage to be mainstreamed as a centrally positioned focus of a new city strategy. An enlivened purpose for heritage has stimulated new community-based methods and knowledge tools. The third part is the focus on sustainability and vulnerability. Assessing vulnerability of Ballarat's heritage posed new challenges for the city's practitioners and researchers. In fact, we hadn't really done it before. We used the Circles of Sustainability method of the United Nations Compact Cities program, which proved innovative and useful. It revealed gaps in the indicators, we expected that, but more importantly allowed the articulation of some priorities and where resources are most needed. The fourth is a focus on strategy, the virtuous cycle shown a moment ago. The Hull challenges authorities to redefine urban heritage as the centre of the spatial development processes. In Ballarat, this has required a very different level of engagement and implementation across the different functions of the council and other organisations. Ballarat was already beginning to work on a new strategy when the Hull came into play. Reorienting it around the Hull's ideas has allowed a large-scale strategy to be developed, which I realised I'd pasted something over the top of the title. It's called Today, Tomorrow, Together. It sits above the usual corporate and business planning processes. The council adopted the strategy shown on the left and available from the city's website, with culture and heritage at its centre, based on the significant community inputs gained through Ballarat Imagine. This sets the need for participatory processes at the highest level of council's operations. And I just want to say on the right you see the new heritage plan, Our People, Culture and Place, which was only released this week. So it's hot off the presses product from this process. The fifth is about setting priorities. The various cultural mapping and community engagement processes have allowed the plan Our People, Culture and Place to be developed with clear priorities and resourcing. This includes an interpretation framework that directly responds to the desire that came through the community processes for people to tell their own stories and contribute them to the narratives of the city. The open online tools such as Hull Ballarat provides a space for these initiatives, often linking together the intangible, movable and place heritage in new ways. The final step in the action plan concerns working with partners and building capacity. It is obvious that a diverse and growing field of partnerships have fueled the growth of the Hull implementation and its successes so far. Some learnings include the need for openness to new ideas and participants, strategies specifically oriented at the disengaged and disempowered parts of the communities, and the importance of research partnerships at the local and global level, which is how I became involved in Ballarat's work. Participation in the Go Hull network, which Anna can tell you more about, has been especially fruitful, connecting the experiences in Ballarat with many other cities in every global region, and has been the source of momentum building and sustaining the willingness for cultural change when there are many cynics around us. The experiences of working with the Hull and Ballarat, especially the breadth of its ability to foster constructive involvements, are impossible to capture in this brief presentation. So I invite you to browse through the websites yourself. The Hull in Ballarat has started and sustained processes of cultural change inside council structures especially. Heritage has always been important in Ballarat, but it was too often positioned in opposition or to the side of the main drivers of economic development, urbanisation and social change. Making better uses of heritage has allowed heritage conservation objectives to be seen as more compatible with development, and values guide the management of change. It is also important to stress that the Hull has been found to be useful for all of the city's areas and neighbourhoods, not only the ones that have been singled out for designation as heritage. Finally, it's worth briefly noting that the experience of implementing the Hull has also started to illuminate for me and my colleagues new challenges and directions for the ways in which we practice heritage in Australia at the local level. These shifts are many, but include a stronger recognition that heritage values are carried by people rather than embedded in place, and that significance is fluid and contestable. Staff with insight into change management have been a key factor that should not be underestimated. As an observer of the work undertaken in the City of Ballarat's implementation of the Hull, I can only conclude by saying that the outcomes have been diverse, widespread and impressive. Heritage and culture have completely permeated the city's work. A growing suite of new community engagement models has been developed. Experimentation is really supported, and many partners are buying into a bigger vision about culture and identity. It has been truly an amazing experience to be involved with this process. The Hull has been an energizer for others to try new things, and other local governments throughout Australia and beyond have been keen to learn from these experiences. This case highlights the fundamental importance of local or city government and demonstrates how practices can be transformed. And here I just have given you the 3 most important websites where you can get all the information that's crammed into my presentation. The first one is the Hull Ballarat website, which does have a number of similarities to the things that Johannes was just talking about. So I would really urge you, even if you just want to play around with it while we're here. The Go Hull website is a kind of global observatory for the Hull and has the experiences of many cities throughout the world. And recently, hooray, UNESCO created a special page just for the Hull and has started to bank up a lot of key resources there. So it's kind of a good one-stop clearinghouse for the key documents. This presentation has been taken from a number of others we have written and presented on the HUL. I provided some references to these in the written paper, but these websites are where you can really understand the scale of what's happening in Ballarat and elsewhere. And thank you for your attention and my best wishes to the 14th World Congress of the Organisation of World Heritage Cities and its important discussions and decisions that will be taken here, especially about community engagement. Kamsa Amnida.
Very well done, but stay where you are, please. Kristal, thank you. A perfect culmination to an engaging day. Before throwing open to other comments and questions, could you just reflect on the importance of the political willingness of the council to actually take this on? Because I can certainly think of a few local government agencies who wouldn't even go there.
Yes, without this it would be very difficult to achieve, but I can tell you that it wasn't instantaneous willingness to go here, but I think the council was just grappling with a lot of very big problems and was looking for a coordinating conceptual framework that would help it chart its way forward. It was looking for a way to be distinctive and economically successful in a competitive national and regional context. It was looking for a way to peacefully include massive new numbers of people within a kind of semi-rural regional city, which hadn't in the past experienced a lot of population movements. And it was increasingly experiencing every day, every week, battles over heritage versus development, which were incredibly draining to the resources, energies, and enthusiasms of council planners in particular, and the community. So in a way, there were some presets that enabled the council to see this as something worth trying. The other thing that happened was the Ballarat Imagine survey. This was extremely widespread in its coverage of the entire municipality, residents, and also people coming in for employment and visitors. So it was sent to every household in the municipality. There were people at every kind of public event collecting more insights, inputs to it. School kids were given it. Old people in all elderly persons' homes were given it, etc. So it came out and really surprised the council, because the number one thing that everyone said in their Ballarat Imagine survey is, "I love Ballarat's heritage." It was by far, without a second place getter within any distance at all. And so they had a political basis to put heritage in the centre, and that hadn't happened before. So I would echo the comments made by others today about the the importance of doing your homework and getting the data, doing the research, doing the surveys, because the Ballarat Imagine has just been it's been a new foundation on which other things have now been built. And it was very clever that the strategists involved did that first. So they didn't start ranting at people about the hull. It's not that easy to sell. And they just started talking to people about, what do you love about our city? We're going to go through some really significant changes together. How are we going to do that in a way that keeps the things you love and keeps the qualities you love? So they don't use the word heritage a lot in any of these documents, although it's not a banned word. But building political momentum has clearly been a big piece.
Are there some other questions or comments? Alan?
Thank you very much. I think that was really interesting. I think what it demonstrated more than anything is that the importance of the central area probably would have been preserved anyway. Whether it's a World Heritage Site, whether it's a conservation area, the key heritage we often know about, but then it's the impact that can have on other areas, and sort of that heritage doesn't stop at those boundaries, and that you can actually gain from a World Heritage Site because it also energizes other areas and pulls other areas. And I don't think we do that enough. I think we too often treat World Heritage Sites and their management plans as, here's the central zone, here's the buffer zone, and developers are looking at your map saying, oh, am I outside the buffer zone, therefore I can build. And
yes.
And I think this gives a sort of good demonstration that a value added that central zone gives to it, and maybe that we need to look at both sites and cities in a very different way than the sort of standard buffer zone. I don't know how you feel about that from the ICOMOS.
We're very fortunate that Ballarat is not a World Heritage Site yet, so buffer zone's not an issue. But one of the things that there are a lot of heritage protected buildings and sites in Ballarat, which are, so that's there. There's decades of amazing in-depth work that's created that. That's not something that lies ahead. But what that has created is a site-by-site battleground, as each individual protected building was scheduled for change. And so seeing the area through a landscape lens rather than a building by building by building lens has been very, very helpful. And talking about values rather than buildings has been, I'm personally very surprised to tell you this, but it has shifted the very adversarial us versus them dynamic, which was very entrenched there. So, I have to say that the hull does, as many of my colleagues will critically say, it invites us to lose some things, and that's possibly the case, although it hasn't happened yet. But and the planning controls that protect all those buildings is still in place, still operating. But to move out of that mode and into one that talks about what the values are, and I'm talking about values in a very broad sense, not just the ways we might use them in the World Heritage or even local heritage context. So, it's a different conversation. It's still swirling around a lot of the same things, but it's a different conversation, and it's been quite a relief for many combatants to move into it.
Okay, a couple more interventions. One from Michael, then Nils.
First of all, I'd just like to echo what Kristal said about the engagement of today. I mean, you've really given my keynote lecture for tomorrow, all of you. But it's altogether just been quite amazing. I've been really spaced out with this. The other thing is that Kristal was a little bit modest about her own involvement, and I would like to put on record that there's two people there, and it also highlights the relationship with the university, and I think that this was another very important point, because the added value, which Kristal has not said, but I'll say for it, has been quite amazing. People write to me, but I'm sort of like a student of Kristal. Could you help? The next point, which I just wanted to say, is that the architecture of today is the heritage of tomorrow. So I don't think that we're looking at anything which is sort of a historically part together. And I think that the idea of understanding a place, which you highlighted in a new society really is something which moves us away from the building into the value of which places which is in. And everybody should know that Yonsha, who is now for 1 year going to be working, she is already working on Hull. 2019 is the first reporting to UNESCO. The actual questionnaire was approved just this month, which will be sent to member states. Member states will be asked to then set up a focal point so as to be able to get information regarding this expo of Hull. And I think that the issue of the tool number 1, which is community engagement, and I think was highlighted by this example, I think is something quite outstanding. And the other part which I just would like to mention about the Hull is that it moves the heritage outside the space of a heritage area. I've always said I'm now completely against conservation areas because they're not sustainable. They're just not sustainable by themselves. That you'd mentioned about the greater Ayatollah. That, in other words, we're talking about the relationships of spaces and the interdependence, the sustainability, that the areas of development might sustain particular areas which we might call conservation, and the conservation has got added value to the areas of development around, and this creates its identities. So I think that we've got something really. I'm so pleased that we ended with this with Hull, because I think this is some sort of glue which can then bring together a methodology whereby we can have a great deal of community engagement. And I just thank you all for a wonderful day.
Good.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up about universities. I mean, the city of Ballarat, well, Susan in particular, and the city of Ballarat were very open to university collaborations. And I think that was a point of genius. I mean, Federation University has built these websites, for example. But the second thing about member states and UNESCO is I'm not sure our national government even knows this has happened in our country, because the beauty of it was that Ballarat could just go straight to the top, the international realm, without kind of having to go through our many layers of government in order to, say, was it okay? And it really reinforces for me city governments can do a lot if they want to, and they can really change the world if they want to, so you don't have to wait for the member states to kind of decide it's a good idea. In fact, let's not do that. Anyway,
thank
sorry,
you.
Richard.
Niels, thank you.
I really like asking people, what did you learn? Partly, how can we keep this in the space, in whatever. So I think I really liked it. What I'm curious about is, last emotion change, last change.
Sure.
So you might ask in 15 years, and when they have now something different what they love, maybe they don't love anymore what
sure.
generation before. It's like this way, how flexible can you simply adapt it, or how can you deal with changing life?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that the Ballarat Imagine technique has been used and reused even in the last 5 years. So it was done for the entire municipality originally, but now it's just been used again just for Ballarat East. And obviously you're not going to get the same answers. You're looking at a more focused area. You're asking people with much more focused kind of scope to the question. But I think we do have to accept that values are fluid, and love is part of that. And one of the things we've commented on in some of our written papers together is the fact that very often in our heritage systems, Australians are very into and good at writing statements of significance, which are very comprehensive and very recognizing of local down to global values, etc. But we don't change them very often because the energy and resources needed to constantly go back and do that are often not provided. And so things do get a bit fixed over time, and that's a real kind of one of the things that we've challenged ourselves with by doing this work with the HUL. So yes, I think we have to accept that people in some period of time won't love the same things that the people of today love. I mean, that's We'd have to be very surprised if it were otherwise. But they're going to love a lot of things about their city, and we always need to be asking and listening and basing a lot of actions on that. So it's not to say that if it doesn't get mentioned in the love, it should immediately be demolished either. But
And you're surely not advocating putting a hate question at the bottom of the set of options.
Yeah.
Friends,
it has to be simple.
Yeah.
It has to be, the main thing is it has to be simple and open-ended.
Yep.
And kind of, as Johannes was saying, not then kind of censored a lot or at all. Although we did have to make some coding decisions when reading people's little postcards and things.